because here are the notable injuries we're tracking, and there are many of them going into championship weekend. CJ Stroud returned to practice. He's been dealing with a concussion for 2 weeks now. He practiced in a limited capacity. Zach Moss and Michael Pittman also dealing with a concussion. Zach Moss has been dealing with the forearm injury. They both returned to practice in limited capacity, and Zay Jones with the hamstring does as well. On the not so positive outlook, although there's still some time, Trevor Lawrence, he's had every injury in the world this year. This time it's a shoulder that takes him out of practice. Jamar Chase also with the shoulder. He didn't play last week. Very, very questionable at best going into this week. We'll keep an eye on Chase. Kenneth Walker with a shoulder injury and illness kept him out of practice. And then the Dolphins. The Dolphins are ones that we always track right down to the wire. Devon Achane with the toe. He's been dealing with that for a couple weeks. Raheem Mostert, the knee, ankle, and often a player of veteran rest. Keep an eye on him. Jaylen Waddle, the most significant one here with the high ankle is what Mike McDaniel would call it. Jaylen Waddle probably doubtful to play, but they have not ruled him out of that game. And that's not where the injuries stop as we go right into part two here. Cortland Sutton with a concussion didn't practice. Same with Isiah Pacheco, who was also dealing with a shoulder. Zay Flowers with the calf. Josh Jacobs still with that quad injury. If you have Zamir White, keep an eye on that one. Najee Harris with the knee. Jordan Addison with the ankle. Cole Kmet with the knee. Keenan Allen still out with the heel injury. Kyler Murray missed practice with an illness, and Christian Watson has been dealing with that hamstring that's kept him out for multiple weeks here. Matthew, let's start right off the top. Which of those are the ones that you're keeping your eye on right down to the wire?
Well, there's a few, right? I mean, obviously Waddle's a huge one there, especially given the matchup against Baltimore. The expectation here is that Mostert is going to be able to go. There's a couple ones that are sort of like, we'll see. I think the Michael Pittman one's really interesting. Concussions are, we used to discuss this on my old show all the time, but concussions are a non-linear injury. And we saw this last week, in real time with Michael Pittman, who was out and doing better and then suffered a setback and then ultimately missed. I know he was limited back, but, so to me, Pittman, all concussions are serious, but, some seem to linger longer than others. We've seen it with CJ Stroud, obviously. So Pittman is one that's a concern. And Isiah Pacheco as well, again, in the concussion protocol. He's also, by the way, dealing with that shoulder injury. And so, like in our show league, I grabbed Clyde Edwards-Helaire just because, again, Jerick McKinnon is on IR. So there's a chance that in a great matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals, Clyde Edwards-Helaire could get 20 to 25 touches in a championship week. And is he great? No, he's not. But we do expect the Chiefs to be able to move the ball against Cincy. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire becomes kind of interesting and somebody that I might grab and stash to see what happens with Isiah Pacheco.
And one bit of news just came in, Jay, right before we recorded the show. Trevor Lawrence, per Doug Peterson, is expected to get in a limited practice today. It just feels like as long as his limbs are on, Trevor Lawrence is going to try to play.
Yeah, maybe even without limbs. But he feels like he needs a holiday. He needs to join Matthew in Florida and just kind of unwind a little bit, Trevor. I feel like if he had an ACL, he'd be like, all right, I think I'm 2-3 weeks away. But no, that's certainly one to watch. That has a lot of ripple effects on everyone on that Jacksonville team. Just with the Pittman one thing with Indianapolis too is that they've been missing Braden Smith, their star right tackle, for the past few weeks, and that has just completely torped their offensive line. He practiced in full yesterday, so I think that bodes well for Pittman if he can play, because Minchell will have more time against the Raiders defense that quietly has been number one in the NFL since week 8. And so just getting Smith back, I think, would help Jonathan Taylor, help Zach Moss if he's able to go as well. So that's a sneaky big one, I think.
The last one I'll mention there, Connor, also is just CJ Stroud, who looks like, all indications are is that he should be able to practice again. He should be able to play this week after missing the last two. And so obviously in a home game against the Titans defense that has been middle of the pack, inconsistent, to be kind, I think CJ Stroud, if you've managed to make it to the finals without CJ Stroud, like if you used like Joe Flacco, for example, to sort of get by over the last couple of weeks, that would be exciting. And I think I would slap CJ Stroud back in, who has been so good at home this year. By the way, not only CJ Stroud, but I think that bodes well for Nico Collins and Noah Brown if you've been using either of them. Both those guys, I think, would be top 20 options. Nico top 10 and Brown top 20, assuming CJ Stroud suits it up against the Titans.
And some more injury news, Matthew. Officially, Rhamondre Stevenson has been put on injured reserve with that ankle injury. We know he's missed some time. The Patriots make it official. And for fantasy managers that might have been relying and getting something out of Ezekiel Elliott throughout these playoffs, where does he come for in your rankings for you now with Rhamondre Stevenson officially out for the rest of the year?
Well, again, he's a usable excuse me. He is a usable fantasy running back is what he is. He's running back 28 for me this week. So I'm inside my top 30 because you don't love the matchup against Buffalo. Having said that, this is somebody who's averaging 22 touches a game in the 3 games that Rhamondre Stevenson has missed. He's averaging over 19 fantasy points per game. And what's exciting in a game in which Buffalo's obviously favored, but even if they fall behind, they've been getting Zeke involved in the passing game. He's got a 28% target share over the last 3 weeks. So again, there are a lot of running backs with good matchups here, but I think he's a viable flex this week. Ezekiel Elliott with Rhamondre out for the year, and Zeke should be for the next 2 weeks usable if you need him in week 18.
All right, guys, our last notable injury, it's going to come down to the wire tonight for Thursday Night Football. Per NFL Network, Amari Cooper is questionable for the game tonight against the Jets with a heel injury. This is from Tom Pelissero on Twitter. Browns wide receiver Amari Cooper is hopeful he can play tonight against the Jets, but his status remains up in the air per sources. The short week is tough. Cooper knows his body well. They'll get a better sense closer to kickoff. Jay, this was somebody that, if you're playing in a fantasy championship, there's a good chance Amari Cooper single-handedly got you there. Yeah,
absolutely. And look, the line hasn't moved too much, so the market expectation is that Cooper will play, and he is someone who is good enough that he will materially move the line, particularly because of what is behind him and Flacco's connection with him. Now, with Cooper, I know it's a really difficult matchup against the Jets, but I think that's being a little bit overblown just because the Jets' defense, one, they just gave up 28 to the Commanders. They got lit up by the Dolphins without Tyreek, and I think that we focus so much on their secondary, and it is amazing. They are an elite defense, but Sauce Gardner is the superstar cornerback. DJ Reed just hasn't quite been the same guy the past few weeks, and you can speak better on this than me, Connor. And the thing is that, as we've spoken about a lot, Sauce Gardner doesn't trail guys. Like, he's got his side, DJ Reed's got his side, so just put Amari Cooper on the other side.
That's the key. I would actually rather see Cooper against Reed than their slot corner, Michael Carter, who's been better than Reed for about a month now. So I'm with you all the way, Jay. Matthew, where does Cooper come in on your rankings this week, and how do you handle this? You have, once again, tough matchup, not a completely write him off entirely matchup, but also the fact this is going to come down to the wire where we don't know if he'll be limited in any capacity throughout this game. This is a tricky situation.
Really tricky as well, especially given the fact is it's a tough matchup, right? Over the last 4 weeks, only one wide receiver has scored over 8 fantasy points against the Jets. Having said that, he's Amari Cooper, who's coming off of one of the best fantasy games, if not the best fantasy game of the year. Are you really going to bench a guy coming off a 50-plus point performance? He's also had a 30% target share to the last 3 games. He's had back-to-back games with over 100 receiving yards as well with Amari Cooper. I don't know. I'm at wide receiver 23. So I'm just outside my top 20, but it would be hard for me to bench. The positives are it's the Thursday night game. It's the start of the week. And so if he's inactive, then you can go ahead and bench him. I would say it just sort of depends on what your other options are. But generally speaking, the Browns have, and this is crazy, but the Browns have a legit shot at the number 1 seed in the AFC. They're one of the few teams remaining that still can potentially have the number 1 seed and make the road to the Super Bowl go through Cleveland. And so I think Amari Cooper, who it's been a couple of tough years in Cleveland. I know he had some success in Dallas, but this is a guy who started his career at the Raiders. It's been tough in Cleveland. Like, he knows the importance of this game. I'm betting, and I have no inside information here. This is just a gut call. I think he plays. And while I get the matchup, this one feels like getting too cute if you bench Amari Cooper. If he's active, he's going to be starting for me. I'm starting him in a playoff game specifically because I just can't think about, hey, I know you scored 50 for me last week, but I'm putting you on my bench this week.
Yeah, no matter the situation, we know Joe Flacco is just going to keep throwing it. So I think that gives you a little bit more confidence. Well, hoof it. Yeah, absolutely. That is it for our injuries today. Obviously, stick with us tomorrow because we'll have more practice designations and a better outlook going into a massive weekend.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.